Mike, how are you? Good to see you again.
Great to see you too, Jim. Thanks, everybody.
All right, you're good to go, guys.
Thank you. So, just excited to catch up. Mike and I spent a little bit last week getting to know each other, and that was great, and found out some interesting things. But one of the things I wanted to start with, Mike, since I spoke to you last week, I didn't know so many really important people graduated from Providence College. So people don't know, Mike graduated from Providence College, but let me just run a few names. Did you know all these people graduated? Christopher Dodd, Lenny Wilkins, Doris Burke, right, of ESPN, and my favorite general manager in hockey, Lou Lamoriello. That's quite a list.
Yep. It's a list that I'm trying to make my way onto that list for the next summit that people are hosting, but I'm not quite there yet.
Yeah. So just if you know, I went to Iona College, and I'm pretty much setting the bar for Iona. I've looked over some of the famous people that have graduated from Iona, and I think Jeff Ruland of the Washington Bullets at the time is at the top of the list. So I'm going to go with I'm number 6 of all time, but that's my own story. But
you got my vote, Jim.
It's my story. I'm sticking to it. So just so you know, I know when we spoke last time, I'm going to show this quick so people don't write down my number, but I wanted to let you know that I'm a big supporter in many ways. You've had my money for a long time. So I'm excited to talk to you today just about a lot of things, but I wanted to, somebody wrote a joke why we were writing, did Jeff Ruland actually graduate? I'm not really sure. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, you made the change from being an agency person, right? Most recently, your Hearts of Sciences, right? And you went over to the client side. Tell us what that transition has been like for you.
Well, I knew that I wanted to move client side at some point, and this opportunity, just the right company, right opportunity, right people, kind of came together. And it's been interesting. I'd like to think that I haven't quite lost my agency hustle yet. So I think maybe it's a little bit of a mix of both worlds still, but no, I think at the end of the day, we're all still trying to do the same thing, right? We're all still trying to get the most out of our media and marketing investment. It's just a matter of which side of the table you're sitting on, but hopefully, and I guess my agency team will have to attest to this or not, but hopefully my experience in the agency side, on that side of the table, is allowing me to be a fair client, but I guess time will tell on that. But it's been a good transition so far. I'm really enjoying it. I happen to be blessed to be with a great company with great people surrounding me.
For people who also don't know, is that Citi has a couple of different locations, and one of which is down the block from where I grew up in Long Island City, Queens. So another reason why I'm a big fan of the company is when we were younger, what year did they build that building in Long Island City?
You got me on that one.
But that neighborhood all of a sudden, was kind of, a neighborhood of just, small commercial buildings and neighborhood people. And then all of a sudden we have the giant city building in the middle of it. And since then, so much of that area has been built up. So it's really helped invigorate that whole area and brought that part of Queens to a new level. So I want to start with the other thing, why I'm a big fan of yours, is your creative these days have 2 hysterical people, right? Rashida Jones and David Levy. And we also talked about this. If people knew the trivia question, everybody probably knows who Rashida Jones's father is, but does everybody know who Rashida Jones's mom was? And that's Peggy Lipton, by the way, from Mod Squad. So I know I'm aging myself. I know most of the people on this have no clue what Mod Squad is, but look it up. But tell me a little bit about your creative and how that all came to be.
Yeah, well, that creative is in support of a new product that we just launched, a new credit card, which is sort of born out of, insights that we got from our sort of more progressive, sometimes younger demographic customer. And that was that people wanted a product that really just like adjusted to them. They wanted a credit card that maximized their returns based on how they spent, regardless of whether they spent on gas or on live entertainment or streaming services or what have you. They wanted a bank that would sort of make those adjustments and give them the maximum return for wherever they were actually spending. And so we did quite a bit of research on who resonates with that audience and who would actually deliver for us and align with our brand. And so Rashida Jones and Dan Levy sort of ticked all the boxes there. They've been great to work with, and we had a big launch back in June of this year for the Citi Custom Cash Card, which is what I was just talking about. And they've been great ambassadors for us ever since.
Yep. I'm still sad that Schitt's Creek isn't on anymore, but really funny, great creative, and I really enjoy it. So we have a bunch of questions. We're gonna try to start a little wide, and tell me if you just want to go quick through them. But the biggest one is from a really wide point of view. What is your take on the changing consumer behaviors that are happening out there? The world is changing so quick now. Stuff used to change every 5 years. After 10 years, now things change every quarter. So how do you guys keep up with that?
Yeah, well, I feel like 18 months ago feels like a different decade or era at this point. Yeah, I mean, look, every brand has to keep up with that change, right? I think there are a few that most people are probably grappling with or dealing with or using to their advantage, right? I think one is just because of the nature of how everything sort of abruptly shifted in the last, like I said, in the last 18 months. I think consumers have come to have a different level of expectations for a digital experience with a brand, and I think that bodes pretty well for us. I know those of us in New York see Citi, our brick and mortar presence. Jim, you're talking about our office in Long Island City. But in many markets where we don't have a brick and mortar location, we're largely a digital bank. And so, over the years, we've put quite a bit of time and effort and resource into making sure that the sort of end-to-end digital experience for someone who is becoming a customer of Citis or is an existing customer of Citis is really just seamless and feels natural and is as headache-free as possible. So I think that's number one. I think that's sort of serves as a bit of an advantage for us. But that's certainly number one, where I think where it was really important before, now it's absolutely paramount. The second one I'd say is that there's, I think because of the monotony of the pandemic and so many people being at home for so long, I think now people are in this sort of constant state of reevaluation, which is both dangerous and a great opportunity as well, right? It's dangerous for if you're looking at your own customers, you don't want them evaluating other options, but I think it's also an opportunity for the brands that mean most to people to really shine and succeed. I think we're all probably in our business dealing with the great resignation, right? Where a lot of people are reevaluating their careers and their jobs. And I guess I changed jobs over the pandemic, so bucket me into that. But yeah, I think there's really an opportunity, but also a threat with that kind of constant questioning of status quo, reevaluation. And then I think lastly, I think that people, when they think about brands, I think there's a different lens now, less so because of the pandemic and more so because of what's happened culturally, especially in our country in the last couple of years, which is that I think purpose-driven marketing means a lot more to people these days. And I think that what a brand stands for, right? The role that a brand plays on issues where there might be a cultural tension or societal issues, I think that is a much more important factor to people these days than maybe in years past. And so, for Citi, right, we've spent a lot of time sort of making, double checking the mirror to make sure that what we're saying and how we feel about certain topics and issues is coming across authentically. Because our mission as a company, right, is to drive growth and economic progress across the communities we serve. And when there's disparity with how a particular community is treated or viewed, that's where I think we kind of feel a level of accountability to stand up and say something. And so I think you've seen that come across in some of our work, particularly some of our DE&I work over the last couple of years. But yeah, I think those are some kind of macro factors that really have an impact on marketing and media in particular. And we're just, trying to lean in as hard as we can and capture as much data as we can about those things and be as nimble as possible in how we come out and, stand up certain messages and certain positions on things.
You mentioned before with Citi being brick and mortar on the East Coast, and not having brick and mortar, across the country. I was talking to you earlier about Wells Fargo doing the same thing kind of in reverse, right? What, we always thought of Wells Fargo as a West Coast bank. How do you make sure that people don't think of Citi as a regional bank, as a New York centric bank, that it is a national bank?
Yeah, well, I think most people, 90+% of their time with their bank is a digital experience. So that goes back to what I was saying before, making sure that our end-to-end offering is one that people enjoy and is frictionless. And if you're a customer from multiple different products that we offer, that we don't feel like it's two different companies that are servicing you, and it's one app and one experience. And so I think that part's really important. But yeah, I think the role of brick and mortar, in retail in general has obviously changed quite a bit, right? That's a statement that's much more broad than a financial services one. But we do see a value in continuing to have the human touch, right? I think there's certainly a desire for kind of end-to-end, self-serve banking, but at some point you're faced with something with your finances where maybe you aren't an expert and you do need a little bit of a human touch. And I think we've done a pretty good job of balancing those things.
And the same with local banking. There's, I look in Connecticut, I drive down the street and it's like, Danbury Bank, the, First Financial Bank. How do you compete and stand out? Like, how do you separate and differentiate yourself from so many different local banks?
Yeah, well, I think it's so this is I think it comes down to when you have an offering that might be perceived from the public as something that other competitors in your category might offer, right? When you're operating in a competitive market or even one that's slightly commoditized, those are the best markets to be in, because those are the markets where marketing is actually what makes the difference, right? That's what's going to make someone choose a brand or not choose a brand. When the product doesn't clearly sell itself, those are the best environments for us marketers to work within, because that's where we can really set ourselves apart and differentiate through what we stand for, what we believe, how we're coming across, and then the experience that someone has as they're becoming a customer or as they are a customer and using our products. So yeah, I think that's actually where marketing comes in.
Yeah.
Happy to say.
Well, I know in the banking industry, you target everybody, right? But, as somebody who's been working with millennials and managing millennials and having 3 millennials in my household, we know they're different. I know you have 3 young children. We talked about that, and you're going to be working for quite a few years. I think the kids are 6, 8, and 9, was it?
Close. Yeah. Feels like 16, 18, 19, but yeah, you're close there. Yep.
Yeah. So the question I have for you is, how do you, first of all, reach millennials, and how do you speak to millennials? Like, versus, things that were done more traditional. I'm a baby boomer, you know, the way you talk to a baby boomer versus the way you talk to millennial. How does that work?
Yeah, well, I think finding our right audiences has obviously become much more challenging these days than it was a decade or two ago. You know, consumption is just so fragmented, particularly in video. So, you know, I think what we're trying to do first and foremost is get the groundwork right. You know, get the right bedrock of sort of a holistic view of everybody, and that's specifically what I'm talking about is building you know, a first party data set of our customers and also prospects with the right signals and the right insights so that we can speak to people across all of their devices, across all of their consumption choices, right? And know that we're not know that we're not treating them all as like individual cookies, right? Because that goes away. So we've been putting quite a bit of effort into building out like a first party kind of graph. It's like 6 or 7 years in the making, and it includes, you know, it includes sort of identity and data that is from all of our different product sets, and also has a connection into the media ecosystem. And so I think starting there so that you have sort of a holistic view of audiences is the right thing to do, because obviously your best prospects or your best customers are going to be the customers that have more than one product of yours, right? Multiple sort of multi-relationship customers. And so it becomes really important to use the right signals and behaviors to be able to say the right thing to those customers and prospects at the right time. You know, if they're candidates for multiple products, you know, you don't want to sort of have your investments or your campaigns overlapping or cannibalizing one another. So you have to be really surgical about when to message them about, you know, product A versus product B, and you have to have informed kind of data-driven decisioning that leads to that. But I'd love your perspective on, you know, what Cadent's up to, and you know, you're obviously deep in the game of video consumption habits and transforming business. So I'd love to hear what you're up to over there.
Well, you know, it's interesting because my background is I used to run sales for Viacom Nickelodeon. So, you know, again, you having young kids, and we were talking about this a little bit, is they don't watch TV the way my kids even watch TV. So we saw the change coming at Nickelodeon. You know, we saw the train coming down the tracks. I mean, you could see how kids were absorbing content very different. You know, this was 10, 12, 14 years ago it started. You know, you got to remember, you take a 9-year-old back 14 years ago, that 9-year-old is now 23 years old and one of your customers. And it's very fast that they go through the pipeline. So it really started back then that we started to see the change. And when I came over to Cadent almost 8 years ago now, the world was so different, right? I mean, yes, we saw that VPVHs were going down. We saw that ratings were going down. But I think in the last year or two, the speed of that change has been remarkable. Even last night at the Emmy Awards, look at all the winners, right? Most of the winners of the Emmy Awards were all OTT CTV. So just about 2 years ago, we bought a DSP called 4Info. And I think going back to your cookies, two things about 4Info as a DSP: it gave us the plumbing into OTT and CTV supply. It also gave us an incredible device graph into the household that was built in a cookieless environment. And we knew, you know, that we couldn't just be a cable linear company. We couldn't just be a broadcast linear company. We diversified into addressable. And most recently, in the last 6-9 months, really have put our footprint into OTT and CTV using this device graph and our DSP capability. So, you know, it's a huge part. We know the eyeballs are going there. We know in this year's upfront that so much money moved from linear cable and linear broadcast into OTT and CTV. You know, look at Ted Lasso, right? How many awards did Ted Lasso win last night? And the morning show with what's her name from Friends? Yeah. You know, that show is you know, one award. So you know, the eyeballs are shifting that way, and the kids who are 6, 8, 10, 12 years old, the way they absorb content is never going to change. It's never going to go back, right? They're not going to all of a sudden turn on and say, I want to watch this channel or that channel or this channel. And believe it or not, in 10 years, they'll be your customers. So yes, Cadent saw the need for that. And that's why we have a huge push into OTT CTV, especially in fluidity for all of our media campaigns. And I would say right now, I would say about 70% of all of our upfront advertisers agree to do fluidity, because they also understand the need to get those eyeballs as they move across screens. So, so tell me why we're talking about that. Tell me a little bit about the future of media buying and how the shifting landscape changing the way you develop your advertising strategy going forward. So thinking of that, social, digital, linear. So how are you guys now going to approach that as you see this changing landscape?
Yeah, sure. So I think like most, we're just, you know, you got to follow the consumption. So to your point, I think the Emmys last night was a really good microcosm. Yeah, I think obviously, you know, it comes down to the combination of, you know, where are our most valuable audiences, how are they consuming media, and then where are they most receptive to hearing from us, right? So we've been super calculated about making sure that we show up right in certain environments. So, you know, we were without calling out specific publisher names, but there are, you know, certain social platforms, for instance, who have a demographic and an audience and certain behaviors that you kind of have to show up the right way in an authentic way as a brand, or you get laughed off stage. And so we've entered some of those platforms in a really calculated way with a high level of self-awareness, right? That we are a bank, right? And we have to make sure that we're being really authentic to ourselves, and that we're not trying to sort of dance our way into an environment just because the consumption is there. You know, the other thing that we are laser focused on right now is measurement. And I know you asked about strategy, but when you're a data-driven team or company, the data-driven decisions come from where the data that you're looking at. And I think our industry right now is in a really tough place as it relates to measurement. And it's never been more difficult to look at an investment kind of holistically and say, this was my return from that investment. And that's really frustrating for a marketer. And so we've been spending quite a bit of time, energy, and resource trying to bring, you know, our media delivery data into that first party environment that I was telling you about earlier, kind of our Citi ID, and looking at the impact that media exposure has on our customer and prospect base, and sort of stitching together the customer journey, you know, on our own with some help from, of course, partners and technology. But, you know, gone are the days where you have a single tool to measure audience delivery and video, and gone are the days where you have a single tool to measure all of your digital interactions. And so it's really, really challenging to piece this stuff together and to come up with, you know, strategic insights about what's working and what's not. And I think we're really good at siloed views, like how did this channel or this tactic or this publisher do? But when you actually try to sort of normalize that across everything that you're putting out there, all of your investment, all of your different channels, all of the screens, it's really challenging. And so I think that's where I would say, outside of what I was talking about before in terms of the media strategy, but that's where a lot of our efforts focused right now, to make sure that we, and by the way, it's going to keep on changing, right? As privacy takes a bigger role in everything that we do. It's something that we're making sure that we're kind of going towards a North Star, and we know that we'll have to pivot along the way, but as long as we're building towards what we think will be what the future looks like, then I think we're all feeling pretty good about it. But it's definitely a time of uncertainty as it relates to media measurement, and it's something that we're really committed to addressing ourselves to the greatest extent possible.
Yeah, I'm sure like everybody else, you look at the data, right? Which so many people have told us in this upfront keeps telling them to buy more linear TV. How do you battle, all your models that you've built that ultimately tells you linear, and yet every newspaper tells you, digital, social, right? So how do you, kind of, make sure that you're giving both sides its due?
Yeah, it really, it gets in the weeds really quickly, but, first of all, I think media mix models need to be taken with a bit of a grain of salt, because usually they're based on like 2 or 3 years worth of data. And if you think about the speed at which our industry changes and consumer behavior shifts, and particularly the last 18 months, if you think about, data from 2 years ago feels like you kind of want to just throw it out the window, right? So, so I think you got to take that with a grain of salt. But I think at the end of the day, you're using sort of a mix of those breadth-based tools that look really high level and over long periods of time, and using that as a factor, but not the end all be all, and then sort of shifting to more depth-based tools where you can get really into, attribution and different tactics and placements and the things that are actually a little bit more tangible and pragmatic when it comes to optimizing your media investment.
So as you've touched on data, and let's go all the way to the attribution part of it, right? So KPIs, how do you guys set your KPIs? Like, what is a win for you?
Well, a win is, I would say, simply put, is a new customer or an existing customer who has decided to stay. And we try to keep that in mind, even as it relates to our brand marketing, which is not product specific and is much more about our ESG agenda, which includes a number of different elements. But at the end of the day, the reason that you are marketing for brand, even, right, is to create an affinity towards your company, your brand, to eventually hopefully get people to become customers down the road because of that affinity, right? So I still think the KPI is new customers or saved customers. It's just a matter of the longevity of that view, right? I don't think brand marketing is designed to attract troves of customers today and tomorrow. It's a marathon, not a sprint. But at the end of the day, we're reporting results out to Wall Street, and marketing needs to deliver that return. So I think as we plan, even like I said, brand campaigns, we're thinking about it with a little bit of a performance marketer's mindset, even though we're not like optimizing on a daily basis to a customer acquisition for that type of initiative, for instance. But it's at the end of the day, it's all about, did we grow our business and did we maintain that growth?
Mm-hmm. How far out, with so much uncertainty going on in the world right now, you see today the stock market is making us all crazy, but how far out are you guys thinking about your creative message? Like, or is it more, let's be nimble, let's make sure we're on our toes, and as things change quickly, we want to change? Or are you planning far out in the future?
It's a mix of both. We need to be nimble, right? Because otherwise we'll just be antiquated in what we're saying. And, slow does not survive 2021. That's for sure. So, we need to maintain that sort of nimbleness and the agility. But I will say that you want to make sure that you're staying within your overall strategic swim lane. And so that's where quite a bit of forward planning takes place. Making sure that we've nailed down what we actually stand for, like I was saying earlier, that we're outlining the specific issues that we want to make sure that we're publicly addressing as a company and standing up for in the communities that we serve, that we feel like are being underserviced from a societal standpoint. And so those things take more forward planning because they are strategic in nature. I think as we get into the day to day, and whether we're trying to get people to sign up for credit cards or become customers of our retail bank or open a mortgage, I think that's where we can be a little bit more nimble, dynamic, and fast. But yeah, I think it's a balance of both. But you certainly don't want to be slow in the areas where you need to be fast, because that's not a long game strategy.
Tell us a little bit about your perspective on the fintech, communities in general. How's that changing banking? How is that changing how you look at banking, et cetera? So, and how important is it going forward?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think it's really healthy. I think competition and innovation is great. And it's certainly something that we keep a very close eye on. In fact, we've developed products that are based on some of that innovation that came from the fintech world. And you boil it down, I think it comes down to back to some of those consumer insights about what matters to people. Of course, things like pricing and some of the more kind of tangible elements of offers, things like that, those are going to matter to people. But when it comes to the actual product, we just launched a product called Citi Self Invest, which is part of our wealth portfolio, which is really like a self-directed trading platform, which is obviously getting, there's some fintech players making a lot of noise in that space. And it's an area where we feel like we're really well positioned because of the trust that we bring, as such a long-standing kind of trustworthy bank. But coupled with the innovation of being able to develop products quickly that are playing off of consumer insights and what people are looking for and how they're treating their own personal finances, I think we're well positioned there. But I think overall the competition is healthy competition, and that's an area where I think, going back to our last question, if 5 years from now we were launching that same product, I think we might be more on the outside looking in. But I think being able to move quickly and to adjust to some of those emerging trends that we think are here to stay, and placing bets in a really calculated way on what we think is next is that's sort of woven into our DNA as a company. And I think that's why we are age-wise, that's why we've been around for so long.
One thing I found very powerful was your involvement with the Paralympics. Tell us a little bit how you got involved and where's that heading?
Yeah, so that's a long-standing partnership, and we actually, as part of that sponsorship this year, we launched a new body of work that is much more about our brand and kind of what we stand for. So the name of the body of work is called For the Love of Progress, and it ties back to that initial mission, right, of driving and enabling growth and economic progress for all of the communities we serve. And that's a really powerful body of work, the Paralympics work. It's for anybody who hasn't seen it, please check it out. It's fantastic. It's called STARE. So the whole concept is, as we were working with these athletes who were participating in the Paralympics, we heard from them that their whole lives, because of their diverse abilities, people just stare at them, right? Like their whole lives they've been stared at, and now they're sitting here competing in front of millions and millions of eyeballs. And the whole concept is, yeah, it's okay to stare. It's okay to stare. You've been staring at me my whole life. I'm not nervous. And it's powerful. Yeah,
really powerful. And I must say, that is some of the best creative I've ever seen, right? It really gives you goosebumps when you see it. So
thank you.
Also, you guys are leaders of in DEI, right? And you're a female CEO, and she certainly has gotten a lot of press recently, and a leader in the DEI movement. Tell us a little bit about that and how you guys embrace that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, we're thrilled. Jane Fraser started as our CEO about a month before I joined the organization, and knowing that she was taking office was definitely a positive in the evaluation of whether this was the right opportunity for me. So on a personal level, really sort of inspired by her and all that she's accomplished, and her presence has certainly been felt in the first 6 or so months that she's actually been in that position, but she's been with Citi for long before that. But yeah, we have a very aggressive ESG agenda, and one of the major legs to that stool is our DE&I initiative. And so, even specifically for marketing, we've got a really robust supplier diversity program. We're going to be spending $1 billion with diverse suppliers by 2023. And actually that number last year, I think, was 875 million. If I'm, don't quote me on that, but I think that's what the number was last year. So we're tracking, we're doing really well there. And then in terms of media and advertising, we've gone so far as to put a set of demands and expectations out there for our agency partners. So we have specific percentages in terms of the makeup of our team, and what percentage people of color represent in the agency teams supporting us. We have numbers both for the requirements, both for the teams at large as well as leadership positions. And then the same thing goes for the talent that's cast in all of our creative work. So, really trying to put our money where our mouth is there. And then, like I said, in terms of our work, we feel kind of like a social responsibility, societal responsibility to take a stand on topics where we have a strong point of view, and we're not afraid to make that point of view clear. And so I think you've seen that over the course of the last couple of years between our BLM and our Stop Asian Hate, and the list goes on. But we do feel like we have a responsibility and a role to play there, and we're not afraid to play it.
It's excellent. Thank you. Yeah, I have a question for you. So there's 110, 115 people listening to you. What advice do you have for some of the younger people on this call, for somebody who started on the agency side, went to the client side, the crazy changes that we're seeing every day? My daughter is in the business. She works at Viacom, and she tells me every day, "Oh my God, Dad, this is nothing like when you used to come home from work." And so what kind of advice do you have for some of the younger people as they try to navigate through their career?
Yeah, sure. So first and foremost, this is a business that is, it's a fast moving, ever changing one. And if you're looking for slow and stagnant, this is not the business for you, right? My favorite part about our industry is that it just completely reinvents itself every few years, and there's new major shifts in what we need to tackle as an industry every couple of years, and that's honestly my favorite part about it. But advice, I would say, number one, it's a really small industry. Do not burn bridges. That will come back. That's an important one. And the other one I'd say is that, especially for the sort of new crop of talent who are entering our industry, this year, last year, I would say, take leadership really seriously, and start to refine your leadership skills now. Whether that's like digesting literature, whether that's just practicing and sort of like taking a lead on certain projects, even if you don't have people reporting to you. Your role over time, the balance between the actual work and then your role as a leader that ratio shifts pretty significantly, pretty quickly in our business, and particularly on the agency side. And that is such a critical skill set to have, and something to be so self-aware of, that you're never going to be perfect in that area. You can always be a better leader. And I think just having that self-awareness and that mentality will go a long way, because at the end of the day, you're one human being. And as you grow, you're going to be responsible for delivering more than what one human being can deliver, right? You're going to have a team of people supporting you to deliver what you need to deliver. And it's really important that that you can work with a group of people like that and keep people motivated and happy and have their backs and all that stuff. So I would say start working on those skills now.
Great stuff. So if you could change one thing, and you can't change the ratings because it's too late, but if you could change one thing about the industry, is it reporting? Is it data? You've seen it from both sides now. What would you want to change?
I would change. I would change measurement. Our industry is in a really bad place as it relates to measurement right now, and that is not good for anybody. When a brand has to work as hard as it does to really outline what its return is on an investment, that's not good for anybody. That is not an environment where investment will continue to come in from other areas. That's an area that's it's going to cause more question marks than it will bring new investment. So I think we have to lock arms as an industry, and we have to address this. I think it's the single biggest challenge that we're all facing if we want to continue to grow across all aspects of our business.
I do have one question that came in. The banking industry heavily regulates products, offers. How does that impact your differentiating strategy from a branding standpoint?
Sure. Yeah. So it is highly regulated. There are fair lending and and other laws really, for good reason, dictate different groups that we can and cannot target, and different groups that we can and cannot build product around. And so it is, but those regulations are in for a reason, and it's for good reason, right? But that does not prohibit anyone from innovating or differentiating. And that's where I'm so proud to work for the company that I do, because of our stance on so many really important issues in our world. It's one of the big attractors that brought me to Citi, is that I really feel like it's a brand that speaks up and stands for what it actually believes in. And I think that's the stuff that differentiates. When all is said and done, and people have to make a choice between a financial services provider on what they're going to do with their own money, how they feel about that company and that brand, it really matters. So I think that innovation, those guardrails are in place for specific reasons, but that doesn't necessarily inhibit innovation. Jim, I think you just went on mute.
Sorry. There's a question here, and I'm not sure. I'm trying to read it and understand it, but I'll read it to you. Since you're in the banking world, you can help. Somebody is really curious in regards to the banking industry and the human touch. You said BOA definitely feels it is important. I'm curious if this is generational, i.e. the 50+ crowd wants it more than Gen Y do not.
So we don't really think in terms of demographics. However, that's where you need to be able to have a product base and a product set that allows people to self-select the type of model that they want. So the wealth industry, for instance, has this huge dichotomy of people who want to just do everything themselves, self-directed, right? But then there's a whole group of people who want to make sure that someone else is looking after the choices that they're making, and they do need a human touch. And so you don't have to offer everything to everybody, but I think you need to build your business in a way that allows people to select which model they're looking for and be able to deliver on both. So hopefully that answers that question.
Can I ask one more before we go? thinking about the holidays, does shopper marketing impact Citi's advertising strategy? If so, how?
Well, I think shopper market. So I think shopper marketing as a definition has changed over the course of